Turn the photo into a black and white image. If you have an image that you really like but it's in color, it will be very helpful if you turn that image into a black and white photograph. To do so, you can use the aid of Photoshop. If you do not have Photoshop, you can use built-in applications in your PC or a Mac. If you are using Photoshop, if you have Photoshop or have access to Photoshop, to turn the photo from a color into a black and white image, in Photoshop, go to your top left where you see an image, click on that, then Adjustments, and then Desaturate. This project is about shape. You will be allowed to trace your image. The reason why I'm allowing you to trace the image is that this project is not about getting the likeness based on the drawing. This project is more about shapes and values. When you are printing out your photograph, and if you're going to do the tracing method, make sure that your final image is exactly to size of the final dimensions of the project. In Photoshop, you can go to Adjustments, Posterize, and in the Posterize menu, set the value to 5. You are limited to 5 values in this project. This process has been sped up by 400% just to save time. In this particular example, what I am trying to demonstrate is the economy of line. Don't try to outline every single detail. Rather, concentrate on the overall shape and simplify. If there's too much detail in the shape, try to simplify that detail, but still keeping enough of the information, enough of that the overall shape to the value that will give you the likeness, especially if you're doing a portrait. The shapes will determine the likeness of the person that you're drawing. In this example, the posterized image compared to the original image, which is not posterized, you would see where the lines, the shapes that I have chosen, that created, overlap. Compared to the original image, you can see where there's a very soft transition, for example, on his forehead, that goes from the lighter to the darker area, from his forehead to his temple. After you have broken down your image into shapes, you will need to arrange values. Keeping track of your values will help you stay organized. So try to number the shapes according to the values that you have chosen based on the value scale that you have created for yourself. Keeping track of your values will help you stay organized. Remember, you are only using 5 values in this project. This is the actual process that you will be doing. When you take your photograph and you print it out, mark directly on the photograph the shapes that you see. Keeping them simple, keeping them fluid, and then numbering your values. you can go ahead and utilize the same method that we have used in our first project to transfer your image. You can do the rubbing of graphite directly on the back of your printout, or you can utilize the paper that you have already created in the project number 1. The next step would be to lay down your image, and if you have the tracing paper with graphite facing down on your Bristol board, secure that image. Try to secure it only on one side so you can actually peek under it, and make sure that the image is being transferred. Using a mechanical pencil, apply pressure to your printout and start tracing. Make sure that your pressure is strong enough for the image to transfer, but not too strong to where you're actually creating a groove in the Bristol board. Once you have done transferring your image, make sure to go ahead and number your values on your Bristol board. Now you're ready to paint. A couple of things to remember about acrylic paint. Number 1, it dries darker than you mix it. So to compensate, mix it slightly lighter. Once you have figured out the values that you're going to be working with, a useful tip is to pre-mix your values and store them in airtight containers. By placing the pre-mixed values in airtight containers, you are speeding up the process. You will not need to remix the paint next time you have to come back to the painting. And the second advantage to this is that the values will be consistent. You're not going to be what is called chasing the value. You will have the consistent value for the duration of the project. When you're mixing your paints, make sure to add a little bit of water. By adding water, you will dilute the paint and make it flow on paper. Partially, the paper will absorb some of that moisture, but you want the acrylic to flow on the surface. You don't want to make it transparent. You still want to keep it opaque, but make sure that the paint is fluid enough to cover the surface. When applying paint to Bristol board, try to make it in fluid brush strokes. Once you have covered a particular area or a particular shape with your value, and then you're moving on to the next value, when applying the paint, try to go slightly over the first application. Try to really cover that graphite. Don't just paint up to the line and then stop. Make sure you kind of slightly overlap, just enough over that edge. And then when you come back to it with the different value, you can go ahead and overlap back with the lighter value or the darker value, depending on the process. And that's going to give you a very clean shapes and very clean edges. If you paint just barely to the graphite mark, that's going to look very amateurish. So make sure to paint slightly past your initial drawing.